Hello and welcome to this very special bonus podcast for Cinema to the Letter. This time, we're embracing the ecstasy of gold. Hello, yes, I'm Thomas. Welcome to the special bonus episode for December. For the main feed this time, I should note this is the first bonus episode that we're recording for the main feed since the kind of, the new modern era of Cinema to the Letter, where we're kind of in a transitional phase. But I decided, you know what, it's the holiday season. Wanted to give you guys something new that's not from behind the Patreon paywall. And I have a couple guests with me here for this very special episode where we're going to be doing another edition of Full Franchise, which if you're listening on the feed, you might have heard the Toy Story one from November, which was the first one we ever did. Me and Brian did that back on the Patreon in November of 2023. But we're going to try it again here with another sort of cowboy-themed franchise with the Dollars Trilogy. And I have two guests here to help me out with that. First, I have, you know her from various Talk Film Society podcasts and also being a guest on this feed for sure. Siobhan Irving. Siobhan, welcome to the show.
Oh, wow, Thomas, thanks you. Thanks you for letting me be here. I did not realize this was a main feeder, so I'm a little more nervous now. But I think...
Right, you had so much cancelable material you were going to have. I'm going to throw that out now.
Yeah, I gotta throw out so many of my really bad takes.
Well, we'll dive into however many great or bad takes you have in a moment, Shiv. But my other guest is someone who has not been on this feed for quite a while, despite being the first ever guest we had on this feed back when this was Double Edge Double Bill.
Wow.
This person was the first guest we had on, I believe, our third episode. And he appeared a couple times on there, but then, he kind of disappeared for a bit. And then I kind of recently reconnected with him. And it's interesting because he was on an episode that we did about Clint Eastwood. And when he did that episode, he talked about how much he loved the Dollars Trilogy, the Man with No Name Trilogy, as some may call it. And he's coming in here with his poncho on, out of the rain, or a giant cloud of dust, or whatever the case. This man, who does have a name... Sam Brutuxan. Sam, welcome back.
Thank you. I do have my duster on, and I will say this. I went to my local Cold Stone the other day. I was talking to the worker. They're having trouble trying to get this scoop of ice cream onto the cone, and I just told them, look, if you're going to scoop, don't talk.
Very good. Very good. Well, Sam, I wanted to bring you on, like I mentioned, because you were such a big fan of the Dollars Trilogy, and Siobhan... I wanted to bring on because you're very comprehensive usually. When you dive deep into a franchise or anything like that, I figured full franchise would be a solid thing for you to do. And we kind of, generate this on our own. We're what franchise should we do? Is something that's having an anniversary or something? And you brought up the Dollars Trilogy as an option. Yeah, are you excited to dive deep into these three movies?
Okay, well, now I have a lot to live up to. I don't think I can say this. Yeah, I'm that comprehensive here, but I hope I am. And then, yeah, so you were just asking for movies with, anniversaries is what you were, mainly looking for, and
right.
I came upon, for a few dollars more, in its 60th, and so I thought, well, the Dollars Trilogy, they came out in back-to-back years, so, that would be the middle, we're basically right in the middle of the anniversary of the trilogy. So I thought that whole idea would be cool. And there's many reasons why I want to do this. Because, I did grow up with these movies. I do have a fondness for them. Westerns were always on the TV because whenever my grandpa was on the TV, that was just this thing, flip to the Westerns channel or whatever, or to the movie channels, find a Western it's on. And also Good, Bad, and Ugly. I remember having that VHS and watching a lot. But so like I have a good fondness for the Dollars Trilogy. Other than that, also I thought it felt kind of appropriate for being look back at Clint's work, like probably his most famous character, arguably.
Definitely the character that made him a star, for sure.
Definitely that. But look back at this character, like just a year after he likely wrapped up his career, with Juror Number Two. So it felt appropriate and it felt right. It felt right when we stumbled upon it.
Yeah, I'm curious, Sam, what is your history with, I guess, not just this trilogy, but westerns in general?
To be completely honest, I find the genre pretty. This is gonna sound weird considering I'm a native from Arizona. I find the genre pretty bland because it was overstuffed with a lot of the same stuff that I thought was pretty formulaic. And my dad put on The Good, Bad, the Ugly one day, and this is very odd for me because usually a film like that, especially when I was like at a very young age when I was watching it, wouldn't have translated for me whatsoever. Because it's not a film that you just introduce to someone. It's a very, I would describe it as a very slow burn spaghetti western. And yeah, just ever since then that film and the trilogy just stuck with me. And aside from that, I would say like there's a couple other examples like True Grit, the original, is definitely an example I point to as like a Western that actually is surprisingly really good. Tombstone, 310 to Yuma, obviously the original and the remake. Aside from that, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Westerns, believe it or not. I'm just very picky, I guess.
Yeah, I get that because like I had a similar thing with Siobhan where like my grandfather loved westerns to the degree that I tried to connect with him at one point by showing him Back to the Future Part 3, even though I'm pretty sure he had not seen the other two. And he was a very nice man about it, who was probably very confused and bored by this sci-fi movie that takes place in the Old West or whatever. But yeah, I tend to like more of the sort of revisionist westerns myself. In terms of like more traditional stuff, I guess I do like something like Rio Bravo or The Magnificent Seven. But I do agree that I think the stuff like the spaghetti westerns or even there's some other like more kind of like they have western elements but they kind of take a different turn with them, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is probably one of my favorite examples of that, or even something as recent as Killers of the Flower Moon. Or you introduced me to a really great one, speaking to this particular franchise, Sam, with The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. um,
Yes, The Good, Bad, and Weird is an excellent film.
Wonderful film, yeah. Or like, Quick and the Dead, The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, Rango. These ones that have like an interesting different context to them. And like spaghetti westerns, despite being very Italian, I'm not as like extremely well versed in them. I did a bit of like other ancillary spaghetti western research as part of like prep for this. Watching stuff like the original Django, starring Franco Nero, or another great Sergio Leone one, Duck You Sucker, even The Great Silence, which has Klaus Kinski, who pops up in these movies as well. Yeah, the spaghetti western's incredibly interesting because, like, I do have an affection for Italian cinema, but, like, the spaghetti western just has this very unique feel that isn't quite like traditional western, but isn't also quite totally revisionist. It feels kind of like a lot of the sort of research I did for this kind of confirmed that the spaghetti western was kind of coming in at the tail end of the prominence of the western genre, where like from the 45 to 65 about like roughly is like when the westerns are at their height in Hollywood, at least from my cursory research. And I feel like the spaghetti western is the beginning of this kind of like revisionist thing where you see a lot of western tropes in these movies, but it does feel like there's a slight edge to them, something slightly more kind of like grungy and grimy and dirty, and I find that to be a lot more interesting, especially with like these three movies. Would you agree with that, Siobhan?
Yeah, there is something about this that's like it feels like Hollywood wouldn't make these exact westerns these exact ways. Like, yeah, there's a little bit more of a edginess to them, a little bit more raw. Sam, you already said it, but like there is such a formula to Hollywood westerns that like they adhered to very strictly, and I do not have the most comprehensive history with them beyond that, or from that time, because like again because I'm with you, I find them very boring to watch.
it's like you could pick a handful of westerns, especially around that time, and you could look at them and you can see the formula right away. And unfortunately, I think it is also due to osmosis and just a cultural impact, what the western has sort of like bled into with other genres in Hollywood in general.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, as is the case with other genre. However, with westerns in general, I make a stronger argument that you need a sort of perspective, I would argue, either from I would say from an immigrant or someone across seas or from a different location who can put a spin on it that is unique and is honest, I would say. Because a lot of Westerns have a sense of like repetition and lack of honesty to them in terms of like what they're showing to us, their understanding of the cultural significance of the events of the films they're depicting. It is, I would describe them as a little bit shallow.
Yeah, and especially when you consider like a big problem with like westerns, even like the spaghetti western thing when I was doing my research, they're just so easy to fucking make at that time, especially where it's like, oh, it's just in the with the traditional like John Ford kind of westerns, it's like, oh, let's just go over to Monument
Yes.
Valley and we'll get a couple horses and a couple
Hmm.
like guys and we'll just fucking like shoot out at each other and shit like that. It gets very repetitive in a way that like many have commented where it's like modern superhero movies, people say like, oh, it's like the western kind of like overtaking the genre and we're kind of like tired of it. But it's weird where like the spaghetti westerns, like especially the Man with No Name Dollars trilogy, has this like a same kind of cultural ubiquity. But at the same time it doesn't feel like these movies have gotten too kind of like overexposed in a way, because like, I remember like I heard like the Ennio Morricone scores from like any kind of parody or some kind of like reference to like these movies, like
It's in
from
so
like,
much stuff.
oh my god, yes, I remember. I think the first time was when I was a little kid. I went to SeaWorld and there was a show where they had like sea lions involved, and there was a guy that would come up initially and be like, okay everybody, when you see like this particular sea lion, you do the Ennio Morricone like wah wah wah, and then they had like the two sea lions like face off against each other. One shot the other one with like a spout of water out of its mouth, and the other one like fell over, like feigned like getting hit. So like there was just like that, even is like a weird example of the cultural ubiquity of this franchise is so fascinating, especially now that we're, hitting the 60th anniversary of, as Shiv mentioned, For a Few Dollars More, which, if I'm timing this right, should be around the time I put this out. And yeah, it's just interesting that like these movies have not kind of like lost any value from being overly referenced, especially the climax of The Good and the Bad, the Ugly has been parodied like countless times in similar way to like Star Wars has at this point.
And don't forget the classic film, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Turtles in Time, where Mikey says, Clint Eastwood? Nah.
Right. I think that's another thing too. Just look with how like Clint Eastwood has been like alive for this long, and just has like still had a weird
Yes.
cultural like presence, despite the fact that these movies were like so old. Like he still has like worked so
Yeah.
long into this period. Yeah, it has really added to like sort of the weird cultural legacy of these movies. Which I'll say I had seen like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I eventually watched it like in high school, but I didn't watch the other two until doing prep for that double-edged double bill episode you were on, Sam, where we
Yes.
covered A Perfect World and Any Which Way But Loose, two classic
Yes.
films of equal quality.
Yeah. Hmm.
But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and dive in. The way that we're gonna structure this is we're gonna go movie by movie. So we'll be covering A Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and then The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started then with A Fistful of Dollars.
The man with no name wears a poncho over the fastest long gun you'll ever see. He's going to trigger a whole new style in adventure. A Fistful of Dollars. For a few dollars more. The good, the bad, the ugly. From United Artists, Technicolor.
So, A Fistful of Dollars came out in Italy on September 12th, 1964, though I should mention right off the bat, the interesting thing about these movies in terms of like their transportation overseas, in the US they came out within the same year, 1967, just several months apart. Like literally, A Fistful of Dollars is January of 67. Then For a Few Dollars More is May of 1967. And then The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is December of 1967. So, like, literally, they came out all within the same year, and just catapulted Clint Eastwood into stardom at that particular point, which is like nuts to think about. Especially, it feels almost like Sam, are you aware that there's a recent trilogy of Strangers sequels that they shot back to back that they've like been trying to release?
Yes, I've heard about that. And I was like, what?
Good thing. Yeah,
okay.
good thing to think of. Yeah, because like those were all shot back to back, and they plan to release them in a similar way of like, all right, back to back. Everyone's gonna love these Strangers movies, and
the summer of Strangers.
right. That's exactly what they were planning.
I'm looking at the calendar and I'm looking at the date. And I'm like, this seems a little off for this, but okay.
It might shock you that Strangers Chapter 1 did not do very well, so they're like, fuck, I guess we'll eventually release these other two. Just stagger them out.
Speaking of Westerns, Horizon, that exact thing.
Well, yeah, Horizon's an even more infamous example of that, where Chapter 1 came out, and then Chapter 2 may never come out now, based on all the weird shit.
And then we somehow gotta get made 3 and 4. Get 3 and 4 made.
I think Kevin Costner, between his divorce and other lawsuits that are going on about that movie, probably won't have that happen.
The only thing he's going to put a ring on is those cowboy boots of his, on a Spurs, basically.
Right. Very true. But yeah, so with A Fistful of Dollars, this one is very interesting because what I like about sort of the Dollars Trilogy right off the bat, which, by the way, we should also say, we might use Dollars and Man with No Name Trilogy interchangeably. Dollars, I think, is the more official title, but in the US, Man with No Name is like much more prominent, I think, particularly the box set I got is literally called the Man with No Name Trilogy box set. So I don't know, which do you guys prefer in terms of, like, do you prefer Man with No Name or Dollars?
I just want to say that's an interesting conundrum for a trilogy of films to have. Because think about it, what other trilogy of films has that sort of issue where you're trying to delineate between, okay, how to describe this? How do I shorten or condense?
Do you call them the Neo movies?
Yeah,
Right.
it's like, no, it's like Dollars or Man with No Name, and I'm like, I think that kind of says a lot to these films. Weirdly enough, I prefer Man with No Name, but Dollars is pretty good, I would say as well. Yeah.
I mean, my only trouble with Dollars is just that the last one does not have dollars in the title at all.
Exactly.
It doesn't, but money is involved.
That's true.
Sure.
The good and the bad and the money. Maybe if it was that.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the Man with No Name. Just it's more evocative to me. I like that more.
Especially with the fact that like that was a United Artists who like released all these movies and was a big co-financer on the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Like they came up with Man with No Name as just like a marketing gimmick, basically. But it's really stuck, even though of course our Clint Eastwood hero does technically have names in each one. In this one, he's Joe. In the second one, he's Manco, and in the third one, he's Blondie. I'm curious, which of those three names do you prefer for Clint?
Joe, Manco, or Blondie? I guess I like the prominence it's used in Good, Bad, the Ugly, Blondie. But if I were going to have to say that like this is this guy's official name, it's one of these three, I would go with Joe.
Here's the thing. I would say Blondie, but I think Manco is pretty fun to say, so I'm gonna go with Manco.
I kind of agree with Siobhan about Joe, if nothing else, because that adds to the kind of mysteriousness, because he's like an average Joe or whatever. He's like a mysterious Joe just coming in. It feels like they could just call him Smith, and that would also kind of work in a similar vibe. But yeah, back to at least A Fistful of Dollars. So I'm curious, Sam, I think you kind of say like you'd seen like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly first, probably, right? I think most people saw Good, the Bad, and the Ugly first, then came back to these other two movies. But how do you feel about A Fistful of Dollars, especially as kind of like the introductory movie in this trilogy?
It's incredibly well made. It's a great introduction. It's obviously, I think it's a great introduction to Leone's work. It's also like starts the trend of like these slow pan shots. You have like a single character in each of those shots. I know in Good, Bad, the Ugly, the opening shot is a dog just walking across from building to building. It's the same thing here, but it's a slow pan shot of like a noose hanging from a tree to like a random road. And that's something I noticed right away that I picked up on these films, just like a lot of really great shots that set up the location and that tell you what the film is about right from the get-go. The film is kind of lighthearted for what it is, especially with how Eastwood also plays more of a lighthearted role here. Yeah, it's really good.
You have nowhere to go but up from here, which so on that way it's appropriate. And then also, like, yeah, it kind of just, it gives you every element of these movies, but like as obviously as they can be given to you. Like, you get the action, the violence, the humor, the storytelling, the location work, like Sam said, and character work. But yeah, I do think this is probably the best to open the trilogy with.
Yeah, I think especially because it's so like small and intimate. We should mention that like the budget for this movie in 1964 dollars is about 200,000 American dollars roughly.
And that's impressive because like it feels pretty expensive to me, honestly.
It does.
For that budget, I would definitely say, but you can tell it's definitely like the smallest budget of these three movies, and they kind of like increase in scale with each one, and even like runtime. Like this movie is 100 minutes long for especially Sergio Leone. That is so short. Because that man made massive, long-ass movies. Like, to the degree that by the time you get to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it's almost 3 hours long. It's a massive epic.
You can tell just based on how many shots were taken indoors inside like a building versus outside, and compare that to the Good and Bad, the Ugly. It's like you might as well be globetrotting in that film.
Yeah, it's very true. Where it's like we're stuck pretty much in this one western little town, and occasionally, like you mentioned, indoors and like certain shots, it feels like they kind of redressed the same sort of set that they had previously, and just kind of like maybe had like one building they could kind of shoot different corners in. But there is a real charm to that, and obviously, of course, another big factor we should mention right off the bat with this movie is that this movie got sued out of its ass by Akira Kurosawa because as has been admitted like later, Sergio Leone literally went and watched Yojimbo. And was like, oh wow, this is a really great movie that has like structure of like a western. What if we did that? And for varying reasons that have been debated, they didn't get the rights. So Akira Kurosawa literally sent him a letter that was like, I really like your film. It's a very good film. Unfortunately, it's my film. Toho successfully sued Leone and everybody, and apparently they got the international distribution rights, especially like in Eastern countries. Like Akira Kurosawa like made more money off A Fistful of Dollars than he did in any other movie in his career.
Wow.
Because like it was like such a massive hit, especially in the States. Made $20 million, by the way, in just like 60s money. It's incredibly interesting, especially for that kind of comparison, because I watched Yojimbo for the first time like a couple years ago, and I remember watching and feeling like not just like this movie is very clearly inspired by Yojimbo, but like I would say 80% of westerns pretty much take the plot of Yojimbo and just kind of do it over and over again.
Yep, pretty much.
I understand, Siobhan, you watched Yojimbo for the first time recently to kind of prep for this, right?
Yeah, I did it for this. After going through these movies, I wanted to just add on a couple of extra movies that were kind of on theme, and Yojimbo is obviously the first go-to, Fistful of Dollars being a remake. So I watched it for the first time just yesterday or the day before, and totally see that inspiration. Just like the entire idea of like a loner walks into town and gets involved in business. Like it's like it felt like I was watching a western. Like I was kind of surprised by the structure of it and everything.
And in fairness, like Kurosawa even said himself that like he was influenced by the older kind of forward westerns as well. There's kind of like an Ouroboros kind of thing with samurai movies and western movies to a certain degree.
Yep, kind of like what happened with Ultraman essentially, and how Ultraman, especially during the 60s, became this huge inspiration for like a bunch of different media in Japan, and how that influenced stuff like Evangelion and whatnot. It spawned a lot from there, but Ultraman also was very much inspired from religious historical events as well. So it's like it goes back and forth. This is something that is quite fascinating to me, especially with these films.
Yeah, but did you enjoy Yojimbo, Siobhan?
No, I very much enjoy the Fistful of Dollars more. Perhaps it's because I had seen this film already and enjoyed it, and I was like, oh, I'm watching the same thing again. I don't like it as much. Or perhaps I am stupid. I don't know. I did not enjoy my time watching Yojimbo, but I did enjoy Fistful of Dollars. Watching it here again.
I would say I prefer the sequel to Yojimbo. Was it Sanjaro? I forgot what the name is.
Yeah, I'm aware of it. I didn't like Yojimbo, so I didn't want to watch it.
I get you. But Sam, do you feel like it's a justified kind of lawsuit thing in terms of like how exactly similar it is, or do you feel there's enough differences to separate Fistful and Yojimbo?
I mean, from what I remember, no. Leone was a very brash director. So much so that, especially for The Good, Bad, the Ugly, which we'll get to in a bit, his style is very improvisational. So a lot. I do believe he loved his work a lot. And unfortunately, as this does happen with very talented artists, is that they take something they really love and they hyper focus on certain aspects and they say, I want to do that. And I definitely believe Leone did that just straight away because his filmmaking style is very much like I wouldn't say it's like avant-garde, but it's like he's very much like kind of like very gung-ho on a lot of things in the films. Like he goes in terms of like his directing style. And so I do believe, yeah, no, he just did not care. Right? He just like I love Yojimbo. I'm gonna do what I do best and just make my version of it.
Well, it's interesting because like this is his first, I'd say, real movie because there've been a couple other things like I forgot what it's called, but there's a Sword and Sandal movie. I have not seen it. That like he basically
Yeah.
took over from a different director, and stuff like that. So this is like his first sort of like official film that's all his own. And I do think there's like some. I think just the budget is what's holding him back in terms of being like later Leone kind of work. Where by the time you get to like Once Upon a Time in America, that man is like excess all over the fucking place. That movie is like 4.5 hours long. So soaked in period detail and big, brash, kind of like, very Italian kind of things. Leone really does feel like, certain other Italian directors, you're like, well, I don't know, but there's like some subtlety, there's a bit more nuance that's there. Meanwhile, Leone's just like, Mamma Mia Pizzeria, like right in your fucking face. And I'm totally for it. I do really love that kind of like brash style of his. And I think this one has like a bit more of a peek at like what would become like so massive earlier. So it's interesting in that way of just seeing like a director's earlier movies, and it's like, oh, you can see a lot of the blueprints and stuff for the later movies, not just the Dollars Trilogy, but even another great spaghetti western, Once Upon a Time in the West. Yeah, it's definitely him a slightly compromised, but still really able to like do as much as he can with the limited kind of resources he has. And I think just like right off the jump with that movie, where you have Clint riding in, and he just like wanders into this town. It's also, I should mention this, on the Blu-ray that I had. There's a weird special feature for in 1977 when they aired this on TV originally. NBC, I believe, aired this originally, and they were like, well, we can't have a guy who just like comes in and is like this, very brutal kind of like take no prisoners, like shoot people down like he does in like right from the opening of A Fistful of Dollars.
Classic Hollywood exec line.
Right, so they literally shot a prologue with a stand-in for Clint Eastwood where like he's in prison and they're taking him out, and it's all shot from behind. Is this guy who's clearly not Clint tall as well, like he's clearly average height as opposed to like Clint's like over 6 foot frame, and he's like being dragged to a room where I believe it's the governor of Texas, played by Harry Dean Stanton, tells him like, we'll completely destroy your prison sentence if you go over and clean up this town of San Gennaro or whatever it is. So they shot this whole fucking thing, and I love that apparently Clint saw this when it aired originally and was very confused about like, when did we shoot this? I don't remember shooting this at all.
I thought you were gonna say that the TVs didn't want to air it because of how Clint would drive the women wild.
I mean, true.
This is how was just that aura that he gives off immediately. He is just, oh my god.
I mean, we should talk about that. The introduction of Clint in this movie, where he rides in, he does the great thing where like they're trying to fuck with him, and his horse gets spooked out, and then he like grabs the railing
Yeah, a fun, goofy bit. Like it was surprising that like this is the first thing that happens. Basically, is like, well, first thing that happens is he sees a shootout of like a that's that's a funny bit too. It is like the most cartoonishly evil fat man shooting a child and shooting at a child's feet, and then they chase Clint off too, and he wraps around a sign like a Looney Tune.
Yeah, I mean that's a big thing I really like about in these movies in general is that the man with no name is very wryly funny, with like a lot of the stuff he does, and even there's a moment in For a Few Dollars More that is straight up a Bugs Bunny bit. We'll get into it. It's like maybe my favorite thing Clint's ever done as an actor, is that particular moment in For a Few Dollars More. But yeah, it's so interesting that like this because like before this, Clint had been in like Rawhide, was like his big kind of like Western thing, the television series that aired in like the 50s. And he'd been in like, other small things. Like he's in Revenge of the Creature from the Black Lagoon sequel, where he's like a lab assistant for like a scene. And he was like, it's weird watching him like very young, especially at that time.
That would be very weird.
Very weird. So this was like his big sort of like movie. And apparently Leone had intended to have Henry Fonda play this part, and he wanted to get Charles Bronson as well at a certain point after Henry Fonda declined. But he eventually stumbled upon Clint, and I love there's a story apparently from like some of the bonus features I watched, which I should shout out that a lot of things I might say in terms of like historical stuff or like the references I do are from, I want to shout out the historian who was on a lot of these special features, Christopher Frayling, who is like a British guy, Sir Christopher Frayling, I should mention, knighted. That guy was a Sergio Leone biographer and has a lot of great detail. I would recommend any of the bonus features, and I might crib some of that as we go along. But he talked about just the idea that like when Leone saw a headshot of Eastwood and he was like clean shaven because he didn't have the classic scruff that he has in this movie, he literally like drew a beard on him and a cigarillo coming out of his mouth, and he's like, "That's it. That's the guy. I want this guy." And yeah, how do we feel about this as introduction to kind of Clint's persona? Sam, how do you feel about like this movie in particular, kind of introducing Clint Eastwood, the badass, into the kind of pop culture lexicon?
It's a little surprising, to be honest, because going into this, especially if your perception is like mine, where you watch The Good and Bad, the Ugly first, he's a bit stoic in that film, as well as like he has some banter and he cracks a couple jokes every now and then, but he's very much like operating at a very like kind of like a quiet candor in that entire film. Whereas here, you see more of his flaws on display here in terms of like the decisions he's made and just how he gets in so much trouble. And as we mentioned before, just him doing something totally unexpected, like hanging on to that signpost and just looking at the father, just like saying like, "Well, come on in," and where that goes from there. It's pretty fun to see that, and I do appreciate that as you see, because these films are not only just seeing about Leone's growth as a director, it's also about seeing Eastwood's performance become more diverse with each film, especially once you get from A Few Dollars More and then The Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, it's especially interesting in this movie where like he gets like the shit beaten out of him, and he does in like a lot of these, especially Good and the Bad, and the Ugly. He also has like some kind of like frailty to him, but in this movie in particular, like the sort of like end of the second act is him getting like brutally fucked up and like beaten within an inch of his life and having to like go off into a cave and kind of like
Yeah.
regain his strength before he can kind of go back out. Yeah, but Siobhan, how do you feel about this, especially as being a fan of Eastwood's work? How do you feel about this as kind of like the introduction to his image in film?
No, I think it's perfect. Like I already said, he just gives off this immediate like aura that you just feel like kind of badass guy that you're like you don't want to mess with, whatever. But then once he starts talking and once he actually gets going, you see there's more to him than that. He's not necessarily that. He's not like a hothead or anything. He's more plotting in his head, taking his time, kind of letting things happen, willing to be a bystander, but at the same time, he's probably planning your downfall, which is just an interesting part of this character. I think like deep thinker, clearly. And then there's that charming humor, like, he goes into the tavern, and the only man that makes money in this town is the casket maker, and you hear him banging at the window, and they bang on the window, and it opens, and it's the casket maker. Like, that's a great joke. And it gives you this kind of multifaceted view of Clint as a performer, as a character. Like there's just a lot of intricacies, I think, going on. Like they're subtle at the same time they're not. I don't know. He's got a lot going on here.
Yeah, I think especially my favorite comedic moment, I think, in this is the bit where somebody just sticks a gun in his face and just says hello. Like, just that's how he greets, like, a gun directly in front of his eyes. What's also interesting is, like, with these movies, what I really like about The Man with No Name as a figure is that he reminds me a lot of Mad Max in terms of, like, those movies similarly don't have, like, a huge continuity. They have, like, obviously, like, Max appears and other sort of actors appear as different characters. But the most consistent thing is that, like, he feels like a mythological character who people are, like, telling different stories about. Because, like, these movies are very adamant about, like, this weird kind of, like, stew. Because, like, with A Fistful of Dollars, we should mention, like, it is an Italian movie, but it's a co-production with, like, Spain and Germany, like, the first two in particular are. And you have, like, various different, like, you have some Spanish actors, some Italian actors, even a couple German actors, like, pop up in here. And then when you even translate it over to the States, it adds this kind of, like, weird mythological stew of just like, oh, there's like different kind of things from different, like, you know, the classic westerns and getting like the Clint influence here. It feels like this interesting kind of like cultural gumbo that like really helps with like what spaghetti westerns really are. I mean, yeah, but just like there's this great mix of different elements that like end up creating this totally unique idea of like what a western is.
And I like your comparison to Mad Max though, because like my best description of The Man with No Name in this film in particular, but it applies to the other two films as well, is like he's the chaotic neutral. Like he's the guy in the middle who's gonna kill them all and get the bag and like maybe do some good. Yeah, he will get the shit kicked out of him. He's not gonna always be on top, which I think Mad Max represents that as well.
And even if he is good, like he's the good in The Good and the Bad and the Ugly.
Like, yeah, he's the good. Is he the good?
Yeah. It's interesting because like he definitely like has connections. Like there's the bartender guy and the coffin maker guy who also pops up later and for a few dollars more.
Pity Pero.
Yeah, Pity Pero, yes, where he has like a connection with those guys, and he even has a connection with like the family that ends up being saved for a fistful of dollars, but his first instinct isn't like virtuous and being like, you know, the guy coming in like the sort of, like Henry Fonda, if he'd played that part, I think would like exemplify that kind of element more, which is interesting given in, Once Upon a Time in the West, he is one of the most maniacal, evil Western villains of all time. And I think like Clint has this interesting kind of edge where he does have like this clean cutness, but at the same time, like there is a dirtiness to him that feels like he could like backstab you. You're not quite sure where he stands. And I think that's a similar quality to Mad Max, where it's just like this guy will do good for like somebody who is directly like positive with him, but that's not his main instinct. His main instinct is like survival in the moment and like getting, like whatever he needs and getting the hell out of there.
And sleeps with his jeans and boots on, which we know for a specific reason why he does that in these films.
Right. Yes. Which interestingly, a lot of that wardrobe is stuff that Clint brought because the budget was so small. He's like, I got jeans. I've got this, like my hat.
Oh, and Leone basically was just like, the clothing department only gives you one item of clothing for each, so don't lose it.
Right.
How about the poncho? Was that Clint's?
I think the poncho was an addition from the Italian costuming department, I believe.
Yeah, good on them. Because that's the single part of it, the single piece of him that is the most iconic.
Yeah, it's especially interesting given, the weird, like the only weird bit of continuity really is that technically The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a prequel because it takes place like right in the middle of the Civil War, and these other two movies are like in the waning days of the Civil War. For The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, they do have like the one kind of like, oh, that's how we got this with like the poncho. It's like, oh, we found it like with like this dying Confederate soldier, so he's like, here, you take my coat, my duster, and I'll take this. Which is like funny. That's like, of course, he had to get that one particular item to complete the ensemble for that finale.
Yeah, It's also pretty fascinating how everyone on set was speaking their own language too. So it's like
Right.
Yeah.
everyone was parsing through each other. Like Eastwood, I from what I'm hearing, like he was having difficulty doing that. But he said as long as you learn some Spanish, a bit of Italian, you were good. Just make sure you don't mistake certain foods for different things, and then they won't get your order wrong.
Yep. No, I do love that. Like a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that Clint talks about is just him being like, yeah, I'd never been in Italy before, and I wasn't aware of stuff like when we break for lunch in Hollywood, it's like 30 minutes, but in Italy they took 2 hours and had a big spaghetti lunch, and then they would come back and be like clearly like too full, so everything would move in like slow motion, as he put it. Because in fairness, when you're stuffed with pasta, it's hard to film like a big Western movie.
It is. You get full very easily. Um, and just going into it, just some of the other details that you just wouldn't get with any other standard Western is just like there's a scene where you're doing target practice with a suit of armor.
Yes.
And I just thought that was super fascinating. It's just like, wow, it's a suit of armor. And I was just thinking about this, just like that makes this film even more unique and in terms of like because it just makes me think about the armor and where it came from and just the story behind it. And that's kind of the beauty of this film and all these films in general, but even this one's just like you have these small elements in there that are definitely influenced by Leone and the Italian crew on board, and also the Spanish crew as well. And it makes me think about the implementation of like every single prop that's in the film and just how it was placed and the thinking behind it. Because there's also like a giant barrel that gets flung
Yes.
at some of the characters in the film, and it's wild.
Yeah, I believe that's Mario Brega is the actor's name, who appears in every single one of these movies and is like the perfect kind of like big henchman guy, who has like the bandoleros and stuff in this movie, and he pops up in a couple of the other ones. But yeah, I think what's also interesting with like you were mentioning this earlier, Sam, about like the way that these Italian movies were done is that they would have everybody speak their own different language because they wouldn't record sound on set. So you would have just like everybody speaking their own language and then go back and like have people dub it, which I think adds another layer of like weird mythology to it. That it's like everybody is speaking English, but they have like weird kind of canned voices that are clearly like recorded later, and the lips don't quite match, and it makes it feel like it's this weird kind of like otherworldly representation of a Western. Even down to like these movies were shot in Spain, but they're doubling for like Texas and Mexico and shit like that. It just feels
Yeah.
like it's this weird like almost like painting of like what a Western is as opposed to like what an
Yes.
actual like time in the old West would be.
It's fantastical. I would describe it as fantastical.
Yes. But yeah, so with the Fistful of Dollars, how do we feel about the other sort of side characters? Because I'll at least start off here by saying I think the biggest problem I have with A Fistful of Dollars is that with this particular movie, the premise is that Clint walks in to this town where there's two warring factions, where you have the sheriff's family versus the kind of the evil the Rojos, or bandits. They have like weapons and stuff, and that they like sell off and stuff like that. I think the biggest problem with this movie is that the Rojos, I think, are great villains. I think particularly the actor who would show up as the main villain later in For a Few Dollars More, Gian Maria Volante, I think is particularly great. The Baxter family, I think, is very like underwritten, and there's not a lot there, which I think is a bit disappointing considering like the other movies have like incredibly rich like supporting casts like help out with like Clint, like really support the whole thing. And I don't feel like the Baxters have like a lot to them. So there's like a lot of time where we're just kind of like having like the Rojos have so much personality, and then we literally cut to like that main Baxter kid, like the son of the sheriff, is like one of the most dull kind of like standard cowboy kind of like things I've ever seen. It's like the wax figure of like what a cowboy would be basically. There's not a lot there to me, even on like a pure visual level. Do you all agree with that?
I think I agree. The Rojas's are definitely more memorable in my mind. Like I'm actually trying to think of Baxter, and they're not coming to my mind at all.
Yeah, sadly, the Rojos brothers specifically, like they all have like a specific personality to them. Like one's very business savvy, the other one's kind of very brutish and offstandish as well. And of course, you have the head honcho. Like John Baxter is. I think I understand what they were going for with him. He's the one that's supposed to take the fall for the Rojos because he's kind of there just to be he's kind of there just to be a coffin for them essentially. Like he's just
Right.
kind of there just to be like a casket waiting to be filled in at a certain point. Him and his wife at a certain point. Which by the way, I do like the performance. I'm blanking out on her name.
Oh,
Margarita Lozano, I believe, is
she's
Consuela.
she's excellent.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, she's really good. And she gives like a really great final line before her demise in the film.
Because she's kind of like a matriarch who's sort of pulling the strings, basically, while the guys are just like, okay, Ma, I guess we'll go out there. Like that guy's basically like a large adult son for her,
Yeah.
basically, the whole time, yeah. But I do agree that, like, the main reason they're there is just to have that incredibly upsetting, brutal shootout that happens, which was another thing of, like, this movie, like, not only sort of started this trilogy, but also was, like, apparently very instrumental in, like, the spaghetti western being a thing at all, because, like, I love that by the time they made like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, there had been like 70 different westerns that they had done over the course of that 2 years, like other companies, like cheap ass westerns that were just like trying to ape off A Fistful of Dollars. So you can tell that like it's kind of creating a genre basically in that way. And one big aspect of it is like how brutal it is. Like apparently in England in particular, like they cut a lot of stuff where like the villains, the Rojos gang, are like really enjoying it and like laughing maniacally. Had not really been a thing because if you watch older westerns, it's kind of like one guy shoots the other and like one guy falls over like, oh, I can't believe it, and then the guy kind
Yeah.
of like moves along, as opposed to like them sadistically enjoying the murder of these people was like very shocking for like the mid 60s.
Yeah, well, that's because Leone is also like somewhat of a historian of the Civil War and the West and South. Like he kind of knows like a decent amount of like specific American events around the time. And so it was like it makes sense for him to implement this sort of perception of what he thought about the West at the time in these films because it, like I said before, it comes from an honest perspective as opposed to like the ones you just mentioned, where it's like, oh, there's no blood, there's just everything just feels very sterile in those films. But here it's just because he has that perspective that feels new and fresh to him. That's just like, here's how I'm going to show it in my film. It's going to be very grungy, it's going to be very gritty, and it's going to be the specific outlook on what the West was like. And it's awful. It's pretty bad.
Or I guess I didn't know that that wasn't necessarily part of the genre, that the outlaws were reveling in the violence. Yeah, even the outlaws, even the bad guys, I feel like that would be like their nature. That would be the easiest thing that they would do. Um, but yeah, they are certainly very violent movies. It's weird, whatever. I live in 2025, and I've seen some extremely fucked up shit on movies.
Right.
John Wick stabs someone in the eyeball with a knife, or blow somebody's head off, and there's a very clean blood splatter through them to the wall behind them. And you're not getting that here. And so to me, it feels more that kind of not sanitized, but because I think it's probably because of there's a lot of reasons behind it, but like it doesn't feel that harsh to me. But like I putting myself in the mindset of somebody in 1964 paying a dime to watch A Fistful of Dollars
At the Nickelodeon.
And get the Nickelodeon and getting absolutely scandalized and having to stop cranking the machine.
And or slimed.
Right. Yes, very much slammed. I believe Clint Eastwood was the first one to get slammed. That would have happened in the fourth one if they ever did that. He would have gotten slammed all over the place. Though I love also in these 60s movies, like it has that classic kind of like Hammer horror movie, like bright red blood. It's like not actual blood, but it just feels like it's like when Clinton's getting like really fucked up and like brutalized, like that kind of like red smearing that it's like crimson colored and not quite human blood. I love that element of it, and also like his face especially gets so fucked up when he's like brutalized by those guys, which makes, of course,
Oh,
the
yeah.
barrel thing all the better, where he's crouched
It-
over and just fucking decimates that guy with the barrel.
With a giant Donkey Kong barrel.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And you know what? Ed, that calls me back to the budget thing where the makeup effects are strong. I think they're very strong. Everybody looks like dirty and stuff. And I was struck by the makeup effects and the especially later on when Clint does get the shit beat out of him, and it's like one eye is like swollen shut. And also they had to paint up a lot of guys to be different races, I assume.
Yeah, I mean that's a factor with these movies. Yeah,
Yeah, that's something I think we should definitely talk about. Because I definitely have a couple things I want to say about that. But I
sure.
think we will hold off on that until we get to the good and bad, the ugly. Because I think that's
Yeah,
definitely where it
the
becomes
most
the
prominent
evident.
example of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of this one too, there are also certain things where like even where they are repeating things from Yojimbo, I do think they have like interesting different touches. Like even the coffin bit is straight out of Yojimbo.
So much funnier in this movie.
And they also they have a bit added because I believe in Yojimbo, it's like, oh, it's going to be 2 coffins, make it 3. And he's like, oh, it's going to be 3, make it 4. So they're adding to it, literally, by one.
And when he's walking back talking to the coffin maker, I think it's like just his specific wording of it is funnier too. He's like, sorry about that. Why don't you go ahead and make it 4 or something like that?
Yeah. Which, by the way, I do love that guy, the coffin maker guy, because apparently he was like an Austrian like comedian who was very popular over there, and he just has this great kind of like in the older westerns, there's the kind of like old prospector character.
Yeah, that like shrivelly old pervert character that has to be there.
Right, my favorite character in any western, just like there's gold up in them hills, that kind of guy. Like love it. If you have that guy in your western, I'm gonna give you an extra star on
Absolutely,
Letterboxd.
absolutely,
110%.
If he has his britches on, does a dance too, that's bonus points.
That's true. He's got like overalls on. He's like dancing around with a jig. Yeah.
Does that
Love it.
dance the old dude from the Six Flags commercial does?
Right.
The modern equivalent, yes, of the...
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think of.
Yeah. By the way, Joseph Egger is that actor's name, and he's very good. And I like him, and I also like the guy who plays the actual the bartender guy, Silvetti, I believe is the guy's name. Because it's one of those things where it's like, you can see the early imprint of like what would later happen when like I think another big thing with like A Fistful of Dollars that makes it slightly lesser is that like Clint is so good off of when he plays off of somebody who's like at least near his level, because we'll talk about fucking Lee Van Cleef momentarily, but like him, and then of course he like Wallach later when he has like really strong people around him. Like I like is the actor's Pepe Calvo, who plays Silvantino is the name of the bartender guy. I like their dynamic. I think that it kind of feels like there's sort of like a safe haven for Clint, and he has like a mutual respect that builds up for that guy. So when he ends up getting kidnapped later, you get why Clint is like, okay, I'm going to get out of this like abandoned mine and actually kick some ass. They build up at least a decent amount of like investment in him. It feels like the early text version of what would later be improved upon with like adding other like better sort of like sidekick characters for him.
Yeah, it's definitely like the prototype for the relationship you see with Lee Van Cleef, and then and later on the Good and Bad and Ugly as well. It's a pretty charming dynamic in this film, and it's really cool just to see them build off of that as they keep going in this film, because Silvanito is basically just telling him, just like, hey, look, you better watch yourself the entire time, because he's a little paternal as well with
Right.
Joe in this film, which I really like, because it's like you don't really see that in the other films, because the stranger is kind of like seen as more of an equal with the other people in the films, but here he's kind of seen as more like brash in this film than in The Good and Bad and Ugly, obviously, which is very weird considering that's the film that takes place before this, but whatever. Still really cool dynamic.
Yeah. Very much agree with that. But yeah, let's at least talk about the climax here, because we should move on to the other movies. But this movie has a great climax, where after he's been like brutally beaten, and after he saves, we should mention there's also the weird kind of religious element of this, with like the one kind of central family, where like the mom has been kidnapped, and then Clint like takes her back and reunites her with her family. The kid's name is Jesus. The mother's name, I believe, is Marisol, and I forgot what the father's name is, but it's basically like the Mexican equivalent of like of Joseph. Interesting little religious context for this, that he's saving basically like the holy trinity of sorts.
Yeah, Mary and Joseph.
Yep.
Yeah, literally. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that does lead, of course, into the climax, with which I remember I was introduced to this by Back to the Future Part 2, where there's a bit where Biff in the Ultra 1985 is watching this movie, set up when they very much homage this in Back to the Future Part 3, with like the stove top over his chest, or as Biff calls it, bulletproof vest. Can't believe it. Which I also believe that he would watch, A Fistful of Dollars more because he would hate subtitles for Yojimbo.
Oh yeah, he'd hate reading it. No.
No, 100%. He would not want to read the movie. But yeah, this climax is great, where it's like it's very simple, and it ties into the fact that like Volante character has this whole element of like, oh, I was always told shoot at the heart, like that it's like this weird like almost prideful thing for him to explain why he never aims for the head or something more simple like that. It's a really effective little like shootout sequence and has some great shots. Like probably my favorite shot in this movie is when his character Ramon ends up getting shot, and you see his point of view as he's like keeling over.
The camera spinning around like crazy.
Especially for a 60s movie, that's fucking crazy.
Beautiful stuff.
Leone loves his panorama, that's for sure. He love, and I can see why, because he does a really good job with that sort of shot orchestration.
Yeah, I think that sequence is incredible, and of course, I do also love the fact that the man with no name ends up like, well, I solved this, now I'm leaving, and you all can clean up this mess. And you literally have the coffin maker just like going around like, oh, let me measure these guys, and as like the movie ends. I think it's such a funny way to end this movie. We're just like, all right, well, goodbye, everybody. I'm getting out of here. And I guess now this
so long.
Now this town is literally populated with like the coffin maker, the bartender, and I guess that one guy who rings the bell every like 20 minutes in this movie. Those are the only residents of this town now.
Yeah. The coffin economy is going to be booming. I'm going to tell you that right now.
But maybe they can rebuild with some new people coming through. My note on the ending is I just want to say like all three films end with a duel.
Right.
And it's hard to pick a favorite. I would say this is probably the least of the three, but when you're watching them in sequence, it's like incredibly exciting all the same. Like it's still like this one's amazing, then you get to for a few dollars more, and that duel's amazing, and then you get to good, the bad, and the ugly, and that one's also amazing because they just kind of keep one-upping themselves. I love that specific element just being being right at the climax of each film. And yeah, you already mentioned it. Ramon dying and this camera spinning around. That's my moment of the movie. That camera shot is just fantastic. If we're gonna move on, I want to bring up just one last thing about the man with no name here. That just because I'm just throwing this in here. That just the way that Clint smokes his cigarillos. Yeah. They're halfway into his mouth. All I can imagine is like how sopping wet that paper is getting in his mouth.
Right.
And like how much smoke is just going directly into his eyes. I don't know how he filmed this. Like I am a smoker. I know what happens to smoke when you do that. Even outdoors, it would not help things. I don't know how he could see. Like I feel like he was blinding himself doing this. And also just taking an insane amount of tobacco. You're just living in smoke when you do this. Like you have it on both sides. Like you've got it seeping through a little bit down your throat, because that seems to be how far he shoves the cigarillos in. And then you also have it going up into your nose and your eyes.
I mean, especially when you consider, like, these movies have a weird, like, with the element of, like, oh, there's no sound, like, that's distracting. And then also, when you have, like, you're not recording sound, you have people, like, talking in the background. Like, it's an old silent movie production, basically. Of people are in the back. Like, Clint described this, like, yeah, I was, like, doing a scene, I'd be distracted by, like, fucking ADs would be doing, like, frisbee, like, tossing and shit like that. Because, like, what does it matter? Like, no one's gonna hear it.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that, because I kind of have that same sort of inclination, just like, listen, I can hear that motorcycle 15 miles away from here. I can hear you. You better
Right.
stop it.
I can
but
hear
yeah,
that. I also got smoke in my face, apparently. Just like it's, and plus,
yeah,
it's a '60s movie, so I'm sure everyone is smoking on set, like at all
Right.
times.
yeah. I'm sure he has like a prop case of cigars or whatever, like a wardrobe of cigars that he pulls out. There's just like, okay, this one's mildly used, this one's somewhat used. Which one's gonna be more suited for the scene?
Probably, yeah.
Right.
These are just burn down cigars to like every length.
For sure. But Sam, do you have any final things to say about A Fistful of Dollars before we move on to the next movie?
Vinny Perro is, I think, the best character in this film. He always has his coffins ready. He
Right.
supplies Joe with some of the best lines where he says, "You had three coffins ready. Oh, my mistake. Make it four coffins." Um,
Right.
and on top of that, he basically escorts him using his cart and using a coffin across the
Oh
town, which
yeah.
is like on fire at that point. And he's basically there as like a chaperone for him to get him across and to help Joe out. And like he's easily one of my favorite characters in this trilogy. I think he's so underrated just because like you wouldn't really think of him as like an essential character, but he really is.
I want to shout out just before we like move on. The other brother, of the Rojos, Sigarte Rupp. I love that guy's look where he's got like incredibly
Yes.
intense, piercing eyes, and he also has the first of many things. Like I love this in any western. I'm a big fan of like when I was a kid, I loved going to like Universal would have like the Wild West stunt show where you'd have people like doing like elaborate stunts, and I always would love every time when someone would be on a balcony trying to shoot at somebody, and the guy below would shoot at him, and then he'd fall over onto the ground. My favorite thing. Love it every fucking time it happens, and it's a great example of that here. And there's plenty of other great examples in these other movies of just like I love a good someone gets shot from like a tall building and like falls over dying off the top of the building. Favorite thing. I just love it every time I see it.
Bringing artistry to landing strand or stomach and saying, ah.
Right. There's a lot. These movies don't do like once again the old western thing. It's like someone just kind of like clutches their stomach and like ugh, and then like keels over. As opposed to people have dramatic like stumbling deaths. Like ugh, ugh,
Yeah, I
ugh.
love it.
Love it every
Mm.
time for sure. But let's move on then to the second film, For a Few Dollars More, which came out December 18th, 1965. So we're heading toward the 60th anniversary here from its Italian release. And this one, once again, there's not like a lot of continuity. Just this time you have Clint walking in, which I want to say this much. This movie has my favorite Clint entrance of the three movies, where he's coming in through the rain and he just like lights his cigarette, the cigarello, and then like just like fucking moves in. It's just like he is coming in with the storm, basically. I fucking love it. Such a great, classy entrance. But yeah, this one introduces Lee Van Cleef, who is another just I didn't mention